Hello, I am Teacher Kelly Tagg, and I'm here with Kathy from Nifty 50 and Beyond. Tell us a little about yourself and your channel.
Well, my name is Kathy, and I am a mom and a pastor's wife and a grandma. I also am an online teacher, and I am in my midlife. And so my channel is kind of about the highs and lows of midlife. And so, yeah, that's a little bit about me.
And today we're going to talk specifically about you having a grandchild with Down syndrome. You did a video about it. It's this one, the lessons I learned from becoming a grandparent with a child with Down syndrome. So you do a whole video about it. Tell us what it was like the day you found out.
So, my son and his wife went into labor on a Tuesday and had our granddaughter Petra late in the day, not late in the day, late in the afternoon, probably around 5 or so on a Tuesday. And we had already, they had already told us that they didn't want any visitors the first day. So we knew that we weren't going to be going in to see them that first day. But they sent us a picture of my daughter-in-law, Emily, holding Petra. And my very first thought was, wow, that baby looks like a baby with Down syndrome. But then I was like, no, she didn't get any diagnosis through all of her prenatal testing. There was no indication that that would be the thing. And I didn't say anything to anyone. Like I didn't say like what I was thinking to my husband or anything. And then they sent us a second picture and she looked very typical in that picture. And I was like, okay, kids get beat up, babies get beat up coming out of the birth canal, whatever. She looked a lot different in the second picture. So, but then they weren't really texting or saying a whole lot to us. And there was just this feel that we kind of got, or I know I kind of got, that something was not quite right. So the next day we went to the hospital to visit them, and we walked into the hospital room and Petra was not there. Just my son and my daughter-in-law were in the room, and we were like, hi, how are you? How's labor? Whatever. And then my son Nathan said to us, he was like, yeah, Petra's not here because she's having a test done. And we didn't really think anything of it because newborns get lots of tests done. So they get taken out, they get brought back in, whatever. But then a couple more things were said, and then my son started to cry. And he was like, yeah, wow, this is like really emotional for me. It's like hard to.
Yeah.
So he said, yeah, they took her out for a blood test because they think she has Down syndrome. And then that's kind of how we found out.
That's hard. I just couldn't imagine, because you just want more than anything your child to be healthy, and then to find out. Yes, and I'm sure it took a while for you and everybody to process. What was that like?
So I just want to also start by saying this, just in case people are watching, they're like, oh, she's sad about this, because I want everyone to know I'm not sad about it, and nobody in my family is either. Like, we love her, we celebrate her for who she is, and we honestly think Down syndrome is a gift more than anything else at this point. However, at that moment and in those weeks and months in the beginning, you really do go through a grieving process. You grieve for the child that you thought you were getting, or, in our case, the grandchild. You grieve for what you thought your family was going to look like, and you grieve the loss of all of those changes. And it is real grief. And I know you're a special ed teacher, so just thinking about that idea of grief and dealing with families who have experienced and are experiencing this grief. Grief is not really linear. Like, it doesn't have a start and a finish. So even though we love and celebrate Petra, even though we think Down syndrome is a gift, there are still times when it's like, whoo, that grief just rears its head, and as an educator, as someone who maybe has students in your class with Down syndrome, or really any disability, parents and caregivers, they are still going to experience those moments of grief about certain challenges or whatever. And I think it's kind of important to know that you have to wrap your head around certain things that are going to be different or challenging. So.
Yeah, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that, or that you should apologize that you guys went through the grief, because I think that's normal, and especially with you maybe see people around you who have grandchildren or your kids' children the same age, and they're doing things that yours aren't doing, and it's tough on you as a parent, because even though you love and accept that your child has Down syndrome, doesn't mean that you're not sad for the things that you lost. Yes, and actually I had a professor say to us, just remember, with you being on the preschool side of special education, there's the stages of grief, just like with death, and that you're in the denial stage still. So sometimes you bring something, like maybe, the parents might know their kids have special needs, but they might not know their kid has usually Down syndrome, maybe they don't know their kid has autism, and they're going to deny it and say, nope, no, not mine. They don't need that the first time. So yes, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And yeah, I think everybody can understand. And also, one thing to note, what you were saying earlier, is with Down syndrome, there's a very distinct look, whereas with autism, there is not. So sometimes people get that confused too. I know when I had Evelyn on, she said some people are like, well, he doesn't look autistic. But with Down syndrome, there is a look. So that's why you were like, okay, you could tell. So tell us, after you got the initial news and you're devastated, which is understandable, where did it get till you started accepting and embracing it?
Well, there were kind of two main events, or kind of two prongs in the story, I guess, that made me personally accept it. One was just, so when Petra was born, it was believed that she was perfectly healthy. Okay. So we're going to get to that in a minute. She wasn't, but so in the first few days, I just remember being at home, kind of discussing it with my husband, who really, he was just fine with it from the get-go. He was like, this is fine. This is just who she is. It's fine. Don't. And I was at home crying, and we're having these conversations, and I would say to him, yes, I love her. I accept her for who she is, but this is still so incredibly sad. And so kind of as I was thinking about those thoughts, there was a day that I was driving in my car, and I was thinking about all the things which she possibly wouldn't be able to do in life, which, newsflash, all of these things she might possibly be able to do. So it's not necessarily true that she wouldn't be able to, but I'm driving along at that time kind of with my not having a lot of knowledge of what Down syndrome really meant, or what a person's life with Down syndrome might really look like. So I'm driving along and I'm crying my eyes out and thinking, she's never going to get married. She's never going to go to college. She's never going to drive a car. She's, and I'm thinking all these things, and I'm crying, and I'm so sad. And I'm a Christian, so I'm kind of praying about this. And it was kind of and I don't believe that God speaks to us in an audible voice today. Okay. So, but it was kind of God kind of impressed upon my heart, look, so what? What if she doesn't ever drive a car? What if she doesn't ever go to college? What if she doesn't ever get married? Is that what life is really all about? So what? Lots of people don't do those things. And it was kind of right in that time when I was driving the car and I was praying about it, it was I just had this mental shift that was yeah, you're right. Our goal in life should be to bring glory to God, to, as a grandparent, to love this child, to celebrate her, to pour into her, to make her life as awesome as possible. And it was kind of on that day when I was driving my car, and she was only about a week old at that time, I just decided and kind of promised God right there in my car, I am going, as a grandparent, to do everything possible to make her life awesome. And having that mental shift, really, it was a really big thing for me. So that was kind of one thing. The second thing was, we discovered within just a few days after she was born that she was not healthy. So she had a major heart defect. She also has an intestinal disease that required her to have most of her colon removed. And so within days, she was discharged from the hospital in the normal, 2 days. Within just a couple of days after that, she was back in the emergency room in the NICU. And all of a sudden, she's fighting for her life, unable to breathe on her own, having to have major surgeries, several of them, one right after another, including open heart surgery. And that whole like kind of fighting to keep her alive, it was kind of like Down syndrome is not the problem here. The problem is she has these medical conditions. Let's deal with this. And so I think because we were fighting so hard for her life, that it was almost like the Down syndrome's not a problem. Like we just want to see her be healthy and okay. And when we got past that kind of first 2 years, then it was like, okay, you know, she's great, you know. So it kind of helped us to accept the Down syndrome diagnosis, I think, a little bit more easily.
Right. And for those who don't know, Down syndrome can cause some of these other health issues, which actually at the end of this video, I have a video I did just on some information about Down syndrome. I'll leave it at the end. But for those who also know me personally on Facebook, I've been pretty vocal that my cousin's daughter has Down syndrome, but also autism. So she's completely nonverbal, but she had a heart surgery at 2 years old, and then just recently had another heart surgery, which was very high risk, and she came out okay, prayerfully, thankfully, yes. So also one thing people should know too is just like autism, there can be varying degrees of Down syndrome and what a child is able to do. You know, some are able to do more than others. So how old is Petra now?
She turned 5 in November, so she's a pretty new 5.
Okay, great. And I know that you have her in special education in the public school, right?
So her parents are doing a hybrid of education with her. So they're homeschooling her for preschool, but she attends the public school 4 days a week for an hour to have therapies. And they're also thinking about coming up when they go back to school. They're thinking about adding in an hour or maybe a little bit more per week where she's going to push into a classroom just to get some time with her peers. But she is, so they're kind of working with my daughter-in-law and son with like a hybrid of homeschooling and some contact at the public school.
Oh, okay. So is she going to push into a special education class or a general ed class?
It's, I can't remember how exactly they described it. So it's a class that's kind of like integrated, I think. So it's got a mix of typical kids and kids with special needs.
Oh, okay. Right. Is it like a peer model type where?
Yeah. I think so. Yeah.
Okay. Yes. But that's nice that they're allowing you to do a hybrid, because where I live, it's like if you're going to decide to homeschool, you're on your own, or you're either one or the other. They won't let you kind of do both. So that's nice.
I think it's kind of one of the like the benefits of living in a smaller town, because Petra's doing so well developmentally. They're kind of like, we don't want to try to fix what's not broken. So because she's kind of more at the, okay, so this is kind of a pet peeve of people in the Down syndrome community. So you either have Down syndrome or you don't. Like you either have the extra chromosome or you don't. So it's not exactly like autism in the sense of it's a spectrum. Some people will get really worked up about that. So I just want to say that before people get worked up about it. But every person, whether you're typical or you don't have typical chromosomes, every person is going to have their strengths and weaknesses or whatever. At this time, Petra is kind of presenting as a very strong person. So she's developmentally not that far behind. So what they're doing is really working. And so like the school system and her therapists are kind of saying, let's keep doing what we're doing because this is really benefiting her. So that's nice. That's nice about living in a small town where they're willing to kind of do that.
Right. Okay. Well, I didn't know people get worked up about that, but I do know that just over many years, I've known a lot of people with Down syndrome and the abilities of different.
Right. There's a wide variety of ability. You're right.
Right. So, okay. So where is she in her abilities?
So, talking about what she can do. So she's currently speaking in 3 to 4 word sentences consistently.
That's great.
So, she learned how to cut with scissors this year, and on Christmas Day, she gave herself a haircut in my bathroom when nobody was looking. She can build with blocks. She recognizes colors. She knows some letters. She knows her name and can say, I'm Petra. she can follow two-step directions some of the time. Like, go to your room and bring me your socks. Get your shoes and, and put on your socks, or go to the table and eat your snack. So in a classroom setting, so I take her to the library once a week to do like a preschool library time. And there are a variety of age groups there. And she also has a 3-year-old brother. I would say she is very similar in her speech and in her behavior to a 3-year-old. So, so things that she's struggling with, she is not potty trained, and she is not even close to being ready to be potty trained. And that's a difficult one I know for my daughter-in-law right now, seeing her son who is 3, and this is kind of like where that grief piece pops up, seeing her son who is 3 kind of eclipse Petra in areas, and that's going to continue happening. You talked about the denial thing. So when you have a baby, but babies are kind of just babies, right? And then when you have a child with a disability, as that child grows, the gap starts getting bigger and bigger and bigger with their same age peers. So with you teaching preschool, a lot of kids with Down syndrome, you're going to be able to tell with their developmental stages that they're not quite at the same level as their same age peers, but it's not going to be the same as a 5th grader who's doing long division and fractions. The gap is going to be way wider. So at a younger age, you're not going to see the differences as much. And that's why I think the denial can be so strong.
Right. Yes. And from what you described, that describes, other disabilities that I see, in my classroom that are not Down syndrome. So, but it sounds like she's able to do a lot with the speaking, and that's great. So as a teacher, and this channel is for teachers, tell us what you would want teachers to know who might have Petra in their classroom.
It's really interesting because I was a classroom teacher at one time, and I taught at a private Christian school where we were not set up for, we would not have been able to have a child with a disability at this level because we just didn't have the services. But I did have some students with mild autism and some other, reading, like dyslexia and that kind of things. And I know as a teacher, it is always very tempting for me to pour into the person who is struggling. And it would be a temptation of mine or a weakness of mine that I needed to always make sure I wasn't neglecting the ones who are typical or who are above average, right? So I think teachers need to recognize that they need to see where their strengths and weaknesses are, and because some teachers may feel overwhelmed by having a child with disabilities in their classroom too. So just recognizing that whether you have a disability or you don't, all children and all people basically want the same things. Like, they want to be loved, they want to be accepted, they want to have friends, they want people to notice them. Petra has distinct likes and dislikes. Like, she loves Poppy and Branch from Trolls. She loves music. She loves things that are very colorful. So in the same way that I might say to a student in my class, "Oh, I love your Winnie the Pooh shirt," I would also notice Petra, "Oh, I love your Poppy shirt," because that would make her feel special and help me to see that I'm noticing her. Also, one thing that's really important for us, I know, in our family, is to expect Petra to behave like a typical kid and to hold her to that standard until she proves she can't. So we're expecting her to obey rules and to participate with the family in the same way that everyone else does. She's capable of following directions. She's capable of obeying her parents and her teachers. She's capable of sitting in a chair and listening. And she may not be able to sit as long and have attention span as long as everyone else. She may not understand verbal directions without maybe some pictures to kind of help her understand what you're saying. But just trying to help her to function in society, because the goal for any child is for them to be an independent adult. And the goal for many people with Down syndrome is that they can become independent or independent with some support. And so we want to make sure that we're treating her like she is a person that can grow to independence.
Okay, yeah, and you know what you said. I think it's hard for general education teachers who have special education pushing in, especially if they don't give them the help and they're not trained. Now, I'm in a unique situation because I am a special ed teacher, and right now in my classes, we have one-on-one child to adult ratio. And actually, in one of my classes, we have one extra adult. We're about to. They hired a new person starting right when we get back. We got more adults than kids, but I do think it would be hard for the general education teachers. And I don't know what you think about this. They're doing more and more pushing and more of a trend to try to get kids to push in the general education classroom, which I think in some instances can be good, but in some ways I think they're doing it a little too much. Like, I think some kids benefit from being in a small, contained classroom. I don't know. I feel
So
like,
can I share my unpopular opinion about this?
yeah, go ahead.
This is why my daughter-in-law is homeschooling.
Okay.
Because my unpopular, I think that we need to have a view of inclusion and a desire to include and not to not include. We don't want, this is why we don't place children in institutions, because that's horrible and abusive and they don't grow and whatever. But first of all, it's unfair to a general ed teacher who does not have the training and the knowledge. It is also unfair to all of the other kids in the class. And it is unfair to that child with a disability who is going to either sit there and get nothing out of what's going on, or who's going to start developing some very bad behaviors because they're frustrated and they can't participate well. And so there's just a whole lot to that. I think that this is why they have an IEP. Every child has individual needs, but the fact is that the public school, there's simply not enough hours in a day. There's not enough employees. There's just not enough to go around. And I know, my heart goes out to parents who don't have the ability, the time, maybe you're in a 2-parent working home, whatever, where you have to put your child in public school. I get that, and I sympathize with that. But yeah, I just know Petra's, she is flourishing with one-on-one attention from her mom at home. And then having those extra the specialized services for physical therapy and occupational therapy and speech, she's getting that. She's getting some integration in with her, typical same age peers. So we kind of have the best of both worlds. I know that not everybody has that luxury.
Right. And I don't know, well, you guys can tell me who are watching, put it in the comments. I don't know how actually unpopular that opinion is, because I feel like they're going, there's a pendulum, and maybe years ago the pendulum was too far the other way, but now they're going too far. Let's try to put everybody into general ed class, and for all the reasons you stated, I don't know if that's the best thing. Some of them would be better, and they want to try general ed before they go to special ed. So for me in my school, my co-teacher, the other preschool teacher, she has the 6-6 class, six kids with IEPs, 6 general ed kids. So her class is considered a general ed class. They always put, if kids are new to special ed, they always put them in her class first. And then later you decide, if they go in my class, which means her class is full. I have 2 kids in my afternoon class. But there's some kids in there that I think probably maybe should be in my class, would more benefit from a smaller, but they have to try first. And I just think that, again, the pendulum is going too far. And years from now, they're going to be like, oh, that's a mistake. Just like they do with everything in education. For a while, they went away from phonics, and now their kids are in upper grades, can't read. And they're like, oh, that was a mistake. Let's go back to phonics. So I feel like they're going to figure that out, but there's going to be some kids who are casualties. And I believe that, and I'm not saying I don't believe in inclusion. I believe for some kids that is really perfect and they need that, but for others they don't. And there's a middle ground.
And right. And everybody has the best intentions. That's the thing. It's not not everybody has the best intentions. Well, for the most part they do. And, and just finding that fine line, and parents, really, parents really need to embrace and understand the fact that their child's education is their responsibility.
Yes.
And when you are sending your child to school, what you're doing is you're delegating that responsibility. And that's fine. You can delegate it, but just recognize what you're getting and be a very vocal and involved participant to the degree you can. So
right, and I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. I mean, some people aren't good or aren't trained to teach their own kid.
Oh,
but
right.
You do need to be an advocate, and you do need to work alongside of the teachers. And this is coming from someone, my daughter was a special ed student, like a level 1, but I always made sure if they said she's struggling with this, that then I would work with her and that at home. And remember that the teacher has a lot of kids. Even if we're talking like 6, they're with them. Even the class where I have 2 kids and 3 adults, it's still, I only have them for 3.5 hours a day. You have them for many more hours of the day. So you should also be trying to work on the goals alongside with the parent, because that also reinforces, if the kid's getting it at school and at home, they'll pick it up a lot quicker, and it reinforces if it's happening both. And you also, you definitely need to advocate, because nobody loves your child more than you do.
Right.
Nobody. I mean, I'm a teacher and a mom, so I know that
Right.
you love your own kids more than anything. And as much as teachers, we do our best for the kids, it's still not the same as having your own. So you absolutely, whether it's you're homeschooling or you're putting them in public school, you still need to, ask questions, be on top of things, and,
Right.
it's still your responsibility.
And just kind of going to bat for the teachers out there too, because just hearing what you were saying about how you would support your daughter's teachers by working on whatever they mentioned she was struggling with. You do realize that you're kind of a parent unicorn, right? Like that just doesn't happen a whole lot too. So like, I was a classroom teacher too. So I understand the struggles from the side of the teacher too. And teachers are doing as much as they can and pouring their life into these kids. So it has to be, the parents must be helping and supporting and doing things at home. So it's a delicate balance. So, but.
Right. And you shouldn't think of it as delegating to the teacher. The teacher's there to teach, but you should think of it as working alongside. And it is ultimately your responsibility, whether you homeschool or put your kids in public or private school or wherever. It's still ultimately up to you, whether that's being involved or deciding this school's not the best for my child. I'm going to try this instead. I'm going to try, instead of private school, I'm going to try public school. And honestly, as someone who did homeschooling just a little bit, and I taught private school and public school, I do think if you have a special education child, that the public school is the best option over a private school. Like you said, private schools are not set up for that.
Yep.
And public school has to, by law, educate every single child, and a private school doesn't. So private schools are great for other purposes, like
Right.
but
Providing those services.
Yeah, not special education though. I don't recommend private school if your child needs special education. What else do you want us to know about a child with Down syndrome?
Well, there are definitely some stereotypes out there that people think, like people with Down syndrome are always happy. That's not true. I mean, our granddaughter has all of the emotions. Yes, in general, is she a beam of sunshine and a happy person? Yes, very much so. One of her best sentences, though, that she can say right now is, "I don't want to." But that's another thing. There are certain characteristics that are common among people with Down syndrome, and one of them is being very stubborn. And so also just the whole area of discipline and trying to help a person with Down syndrome to kind of comply with acceptable behavior. I know my granddaughter definitely is this way, and there's a whole book out. I think it's called Supporting Positive Behavior with Individuals with Down Syndrome. And it's all about how to discipline a child with Down syndrome because they don't respond well generally with like kind of negative reinforcement, and you really just have to do a lot of positive reinforcement. So that is one, thing that I've definitely noticed. And just, there is just a lot of joy in having a person in your life with Down syndrome. It's opened a whole new world up to me. I know this is true of me, and I've talked with other people who have relatives and friends with Down syndrome. Now, if I see someone in the community that has Down syndrome, I'm like drawn to them. I want to talk to them. And lots of people are this way. If I'm out somewhere with Petra and someone else sees her, notices her, people come up and talk to us all the time. So it's just, you just have like a bigger world. You notice people, you're kinder, more accepting. And I think it's just been overall such a positive thing to have her in our family.
Yes, actually, I worked ESY one summer with high school, and we had one boy with Down syndrome, and it was so hard to get him off the bus. Like, you couldn't force him. Getting him to get off the bus was like a big ordeal every day. We were talking about the stubbornness. Yes. Also, one thing that I know is typical of children with Down syndrome is that they love music and movement and dancing. Yes.
And that is, I will say, the best way that my granddaughter learns. She could sing. She knows all of the words to all of the songs in the new Trolls movie that came out in 2023. What is that? Trolls Band Together. If I'm now, okay, people with Down syndrome usually can't sing very well, so her pitch is terrible. But if I turn those songs on in the car when we're driving, she will sing along and she will hit almost every word. So it's just amazing. Before she could even talk, she could sing.
Right. And there are not just Down syndrome, but some other disabilities where singing is how they learn. I had one little boy last year who wouldn't talk at all, but he could sing like a lot of songs. So
Yeah.
yes. So yeah, that is one good way to learn through play and through singing. And so
Definitely.
yes. So anything else you want teachers or just the general public to know about a child with Down syndrome or Petra or anything?
I guess educationally, one other thing I know is true that like learning through memorization and by rote is something that is a strength. So trying to teach a person with Down syndrome to read, you need to kind of do a mix of phonics and whole language. I'm all about the phonics, but a person with Down syndrome is not going to learn that way the best from what research has shown. So I think that's an important thing for educators to know. Aside from that, that was just one thing that kind of popped into my mind. But I think that if you are a parent maybe listening to this and maybe you have a new diagnosis, I would just encourage you to try to lay aside your fears and to just be joyful about the beautiful child that God is giving you and your family, and just recognize that that you're having a baby, you're having a child, and that they're a child first. And yes, they are a person with Down syndrome, but they are not Down syndrome. That's not what they are. It just happens to be something they have, and that doesn't necessarily define everything about them. So we can lay aside the fear and just kind of embrace the joy.
Right. So also another question for parents, but have you or your daughter or son, have they done any type of support groups or something to talk with other people in the same situation?
So they have tried. Okay, Petra was born in November of 2019, and we all know what happened in 2020. Yeah. So there was that. And so that kind of, put that off the table. But we do live in a very rural area, and so there aren't a lot of active. And after COVID happened, even the ones that were active, like maybe an hour away, they've just kind of never really blossomed back together. I know that I belong to a couple of Facebook groups. My daughter-in-law does as well. They have made friends with some different families who have kids with Down syndrome, and they will get together occasionally for like a play date. But again, like, there aren't a ton of people with Down syndrome right in their town. And so connecting with people, it usually involves like driving an hour. So it can be kind of tricky, but there are other places though. If you live in a bigger city, there are places like Gigi's Playhouse, which is like a whole like sensory gym type place that people with Down syndrome can go to. There's different associations. They have like things called Buddy Walk, where they'll do a walk every year to raise awareness. There's all kinds of things available. It's just kind of hard for us to participate because of where we live.
Right. I'm sure there's online groups people can, so like you could do a Zoom
Right.
call.
And I think some of the Facebook groups, in fact, I belong to one for grandparents, and they do Zoom calls occasionally. I don't have time for that.
Right.
But yes, it's something you can do.
Okay, good to know. Because I think support is key. It's,
Right.
talking to people in your same situation.
Right.
Well, thanks for coming on and talking with me and my audience about this today.
Yeah, it was super fun. So thanks for having me.
Yes, and before we go, I want to show your channel one more time. She's got a brand new channel called 50 Nifty and Beyond, where she talks about this subject and many others. So go subscribe to her channel. You're up to 27 subscribers. You got 3 more since the other day. Yes, good.
Yeah. So anyway,
she gives great advice, lots of wisdom on many different topics. So actually, I want to watch your video about giving up Diet Coke. I've cut back since I watched your other video a few days ago. So
I put an update on. I'm in a world of hurt right now. So
I'm doing it gradually because I don't want the caffeine withdrawals and headaches. But your video did make me decide to do it. So yeah.
Oh, well, great. Thanks. Awesome.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Okay. Thank you. Goodbye.